Okay, can you hear me, Katina?
Yes, I can, perfectly.
Yeah, sounds great. Right. Thanks, everybody. Let me do a quick introduction because this is a real honour for me to introduce somebody who I love to you. So here we go. It gives me great pleasure to be able to introduce Professor Katina Michael. Katina is the professor in the School for the Future of Innovation in Society and School of Computing, Informatics and Decision Systems Engineering at Arizona State in Tempe, US. Katina researches predominantly in the area of emerging technologies and has secondary interests in technologies used for national security and their corresponding social implications. So there's really no better person that Paul and I could call on to give her insights today. Katina was previously Associate Dean International at the University of Wollongong, where she was employed in the School of Computing and IT since 2002. Katina has held visiting academic appointments at Nanjing University in China and the University of Southampton, UK, and has taught at the Singapore Institute of Management, as well as overseeing Wollongong University courses in about 5 or 8 countries around the world. In 2017, Katina was awarded the Brian M. O'Connell Distinguished Service Award from the Society for the Social Implications of Technology. She's the founding editor-in-chief of IEEE Transactions on Technology and Society, which we launched in 2020, and I'm proud to say that I'm one of the servants who will act as one of the associate editors for her journal. So without further ado, please help me welcome our younger, wiser sister to today's symposium.
Well, thank you, Jason and Paul. I couldn't think of 2 individuals to host this annual Australian-Somali Research and Community Symposium than you both. I'm hoping everyone can hear me.
Thanks.
Great. In the next 20 minutes, I'll be talking about biometrics in Somalia and emphasising privacy, data rights and cybersecurity implications for this path forward. And as I said, 2 key people in Paul and Jason in the IT impacts for social good. And I've been following the deep dive into this very important topic and this research that is happening quite independently, but with community involvement of various stakeholders around the world. I want to acknowledge that the presentation I'm about to give was supported by my research assistant, Salah Hamdoun, who worked vigorously in the last 2 weeks to bring this to you, and I'm going to attempt to share my screen. Can you see that?
We can, thanks.
Okay, great. So I want to begin by emphasising that, according to the World Bank, Somalia's capability to make social progress is delayed due to the lack of a national ID system. Now, this is the same sort of principle that has been used in an excuse or as a momentum or as a driver to introduce the Aadhaar system in India and even the national identity system in Pakistan. So it's the same thrust. We have an international organization in the World Bank, an institution, saying, look, if we want social progress, we've got to be able to identify the citizens in a particular nation, and this being Somalia. So the role of biometrics, according to multiple stakeholders, is to introduce security, but also citizenship. And it's about social securitization of Somalia's citizenry. But on the one hand, we're stating the cause is for security, and on the other, it's for citizenship. And if we look through the ages, identity tokens, for example, passports, have either been used in a way to give someone an identity, a citizenship to a particular nation state, or when it's been taken away from them, it's basically been used as an impetus towards genocide. But here we have an advanced technology called biometrics, of which we wish to use the fingerprint mode to identify Somalians. So the last universal vote, as you probably already heard this morning, was 50 years ago in 1969, and 3 recent elections in 2009, 2012 and 2017 allowed lawmakers, which were chosen by approximately 14,000 clan delegates, to actually elect a president. And so what we're talking about in the next election is a breakaway from this clan mentality towards individuals voting in and electing a president. In this case, we see an image of women waiting to cast their votes in the presidential election in November of 2017. And as you can see, the women and their faces, they don't really want to be photographed, but at the same time, they're a bit concerned, perhaps anxious, and perhaps even excited. I don't know how you interpret this, but they are holding in their hands some form of card, and it's probably got a picture on that card. Now, the movement towards biometrics is really about this notion of one print, one vote, one fingerprint, one vote. And the 2020 or 21 elections, as whatever might happen, will be the first one since 1969 to be based upon individual votes. However, over 77% of Somalia's population are estimated to lack an official proof of identity, and thus the impetus and thrust for a biometric system, as if biometrics will solve the problem of identity. Now, as a backdrop, NGOs, through the World Food Programme, basically can identify about 60 to 65% of the current population if you exclude children. But the biometric system is almost acknowledged to possibly even fingerprint all children over the age of 5. So this is trying to actually incorporate most of the citizens. And according to Somalia's National Independent Electoral Commission, Chairperson Halima Ibrahim, her hope is that at a minimum, we want to register between 2 and 3 million Somalis, despite that there are an estimated 12 million. So realistically, only half of these 12 million could possibly be reached and registered. But by the time the one print, one vote election comes around, they believe they will only have between 2 and 3 million Somalis. So that begs the question, is that almost still somewhat reaching urban populations, or in fact, the actual clan leaders anyway? So how useful will this move towards the biometrics, one print, one vote actually be? So we see the inherent function of biometrics, and then we see the issues that might arise. These are privacy issues. Who will store the information? Who will own the system? How will it be controlled? By whom will the registrations occur? What are the sensitivities towards this? For example, where will the information be stored? And we see this as well with data rights. Who will have access to the data? How can we anonymize and secure the voting process? And how will people be able to ascertain that there has not been any corruption during that point? I mean, there's nothing to stop people who are corrupt from ambushing particular voting areas and forcing people to put a fingerprint and a particular vote through the technology. I mean, that's not unheard of. We can also look at cybersecurity issues. How secure are these systems, and do they always work? What are the risks associated with actually instituting an advanced technology like biometrics in a country like Somalia? So the role of technology to solve problems and address underlying issues. Now, technology is often posed as a silver bullet solution. Just introduce the biometrics and everything will be fine. But the underlying issues really need to be resolved. And this is a holistic approach to solving the issues in this amazing place called Somalia, which is separated from, say, Yemen through the Gulf of Aden and has this amazing port peninsula, which really is an access through to the Middle East. So the governance structures is the constitutionality at the moment by going to the one print, one vote system, or is it unconstitutional as we currently see in the legislation? And what kinds of changes need to be done to actually allow for governance structures to be instituted to support the role of technology for good in this instance? So does the tech really address the cultural issues? We haven't really asked these questions. I think the team there at Swinburne University is well aware of the process required to engage people through the investigation of cultural issues that may help in the adoption of biometrics or actually halt the adoption and look at alternatives. I know that stakeholders, for example, like the World Bank, USAID, and a whole lot of other consultants and vendors and external clients and vendors are there in droves at the moment through humanitarian programs and otherwise. Not because they smell dollars in the implementation of biometrics, but because they wish to see a democratic process take place in the area of Somalia. But one has to be quite aware that it is predominantly white people who are instituting these biometric systems and almost imposing them on developing nations as a means of prosperity and economic progress and social progress. But it is an external stakeholder coming in and saying, this is what we think will solve your issues, we will roll it out, then we'll go away and you start to work and live with these systems that we've instituted. So how much of this is really Somali-driven or diaspora of Somalians driven? And how much of it really is about a national ID program, the identification of credentials of people, the verification of financial services and its customers in the country, social protection programs, and even border management efforts. So we see that we are talking about the role of biometrics to solve the issue of voting. But in fact, we've already seen scope creep, and people openly talk about ports, migration, social protection of the people, verification of financial services and cash transfers, the identification and credentials of people, and this national ID program, which is not really about voting. It's not really about giving the people autonomy to have the right to vote. It's about something else. So we are muddying the issues here at hand. And what I would say is that our approach has to be people-centered. Absolutely. And I think the projects that both Paul and Jason, the team there in Swinburne, are trying to position to the community and the international stakeholders is, look, give us a go at what's called user-centered design. Let us co-design this process. Let's not impose a system, because systems don't solve underlying problems. We need to elicit requests from a variety of representatives of the people. Start deliberating with the people. Fund the co-design process. Don't rush in saying biometrics is the golden process. It may end up well being that which the people want. But how do we ensure ownership of the process through a process of co-design, so that we don't just go into a country, impose a standard, walk away, and then hope that democracy by design will occur? So we need local expertise. We need to develop the locals who have IT expertise, who have cultural expertise, that have socio-technical understanding to actually implement this system. So I think I'll finish there, and just to put up a map of this wonderful place we're talking about today, because there are a lot of geopolitical pressures here. There are a lot of external forces here. This area here that I'm pointing to, the Gulf of Aden, really gives us an entry into Saudi Arabia and Sudan. A lot of these, particularly on the African coast, conflict areas. And the question is, what is the purpose of this identity system? Is it to liberate the people? And how will we elicit what the actual people want if we don't actually ask people and we just go and impose our sets of values? So I'll leave it at that, and perhaps go back to you, Jason and Paul.
Right, thank you, Katina. We're about to unpack a lot of what you've discussed in a couple of focus groups after your presentation. I might just turn the screen around. We're on my laptop at the moment, but if there's any questions quickly, would you be happy to answer one or two?
Of course, yes. It's great to see everyone there. I think it's wonderful. Congratulations. Hi, guys. Hello.
That's a bit better. There we are.
And behind me, Jason, while people are asking questions, I've got issues of privacy, trust, surveillance, human rights, the role of ICT in democratization, scope creep, governance structures, democracy by design, and all of these things that I'm sure you're going to cover in the upcoming focus groups.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Let me be the MC here. Yes.
Just a question about the metrics. And I'm a Kenyan of Somali origin, who was linked to Somalia. And Kenya being a stable country for almost 60 years, are still struggling to set, reasonable and trustable metric. Have you learned any lessons from the failures? I know one of their major issues is corruption and, data manipulation. So how will Somalia be different given the governance issues that you're facing there?
Katina and Paul may be able to share in these answers. Digital ID, corruption. Katina, your thoughts on that? Learning from the experience of other countries as they've gone through these?
Yes, I think you're talking about the access of access, AXIS, the access of accessibility. And I think when we go digital, we often believe that it's fully transparent. It's an auditable system. It's an auditable process. We can count one print for one person and one vote. But in fact, corruption in digital systems is even more difficult to detect than a paper-based process often, because there's the assumption that we're secure, and the paradox is that we still have insecurity. It doesn't solve all the problems. As the NEIC chairwoman said, basically we're hoping for 2 to 3 million people to be registered in the first year of the voting process, but there are 12 million Somalians. And the question then arises, we don't know who is there unless we're filming. And even then we don't know. There's provocation. You must vote this person, or you must do this, by clan leaders or by external forces. We still have this ability to corrupt digital systems. But I think at least, and of course this is what happened in the Aadhaar system. When we introduced Aadhaar in India, people said we will only use it for national identity system. And then what happened? They used it to open bank accounts. And then they used it also for an employee ID number to ensure taxation. So you see this scope creep happen. And then the question is, how is the data managed? How can we prove, even in the digital world? I'm not saying we should doubt our digital systems, but we can't have false trust in them either.
I think a follow-up to that was probably the global survey that the research group is doing here, world's best practices, and then trying to work out what would be the benchmark for a digital ID system. And as Katina said, maybe taking a user-centred approach rather than somebody like us saying, here is what you should have. It should be a collaboration of, as I think Ware said in the morning, locals know their own problems, how to solve them, but they just don't have certain things, the capabilities or capacities, whether that's financial or the governance, the frameworks are in place. Yes?
Well, in a devil's advocate, in a cultural and religious society, how would you sell this technology where people are prejudiced about Western society, taking information which have been in Afghanistan with the Taliban infiltration, and many of that information goes to the community? How would they trust this system would secure their privacy, but it's a tool to help them get better?
Isn't it often you need that figurehead that is trusted, that one person or that organisation, to go in and sell the idea of the benefits, the value proposition, to take away some of those doubts. And we've done this in a couple of projects, not related to digital ID, but if you go in and talk about the internet to people who've never had the internet, and start slowly, and they're worried about what will it do to my family, my village, all the bad things we know that the internet can deliver. But it can do some positive things as well. So if you have that one person in, and I'm thinking, Katina, and you'll know this, way back at Google, when they started their humanitarian part of google.org, their previous executive director there, he was a medical person, epidemiologist, but he was Google's head of how do we go in and now use our Google wealth to do good for society. So he would go in and he would give his stories of how he travelled through Southeast Asia and the subcontinent, and the religious experiences that he had, so he could build this relationship, this rapport. And he's standing there as the head of Google's humanitarian department or organisation, but he's also now very close to the person who they're trying to implement, and this was like a polio or a vaccine program. And those mums are saying, no, I don't want a Westerner, a team to come in and put a needle into my child's arm. But that trust was built up very quickly through the person's experiences. And I think that's one way to do it. Do you two want to jump in?
In fact, we'll talk to this a little bit more this afternoon when I make my presentation as well. But are there other questions for Katina?
Yes, to you. Your research is great. What you're doing is amazing. And I'm sure you're facing a lot of challenges and constraints and issues. What is your research or your team doing in order to convey this wonderful research you're doing to the Somalian government? And I'm pretty sure this digital ID system you're doing will solve a lot of issues in terms of people crossing your borders, people entering the country, the port, all these fraud issues. What is your team doing about this in terms of talking and conveying federal and state government? Because that will be your biggest challenge. Education is pretty low in Somalia, so you'll find very hard to convey certain groups, certain people to actually take this system and live with this system for the next 50, 100 years.
That's so beautifully put. You should be one of these people that is leading these focus groups and this collaboration with the Somali government and also with the people of Somalia and the diaspora. I think the first thing is to know our limitations and be humble. I am somebody from Australia. I've been researching biometric systems in various nation states. I've been looking at this rapid investment by global organizations and institutes and looking at really what is this achieving. I used to work for an industry network vendor. I see the potential for vendors to smell money in the implementation of these nationwide systems. I'm not saying economically it's a bad idea to actually help another nation implement a system, but how are we building from the grassroots up, right, this change? The change is not going to come from white people like me. The change is going to come from Somalians and Somalian diaspora who love Somalia, who want to see Somalia prosper, who want to see economic progress. It will happen from the grassroots where people say, enough, we don't want this, but we want this. The question is how to coordinate the people. So when you ask me what is my team doing, a lot of the people at the Center for Science Policy Outcomes in Washington, D.C., and my group here in the Society Policy and Engineering Collective and in the School for the Future Innovation, we are trying to really promote the idea of deliberation with the people. That if we talk about participatory design, it doesn't mean we go and implement a system without asking people. It doesn't mean we don't do a survey, we don't do interviews, we don't look at the landscape, the complexity of the geopolitical issues, the cultural pressures, the religions, as the man said in the second row, the belief system, the education level, the hopes and the vision. How can we look at, not in a dystopic view, but utopian view, what is the future for Somalia? We are currently here, but we want to go here in the next 10 years. Give ourselves a short time horizon. And how do we mobilize the resources on the ground to enact a coordination and to enact change? And this has to come from within. Whenever we have seen external parties come in to educate, right? We are doing something that is not sustainable. So whatever solution we implement, with the help of teams like Jason and Paul and our teams here, whatever is implemented must be self-sustainable, must be self-healing, must be coordinated by the people on the ground, because that is when it will last. You know, I'm a little bit skeptical of humanitarian programs that give people a big pot of money, only to return the pot of money back to the stakeholder who is creating the actual biometric implementation. This is not going to Somalia. This has gone to Somalia and then gone out of Somalia. So the question is, how do you empower? Yes, you will need to buy systems perhaps, but the question is, the money must be staying within the country, not going outside to an external vendor, where this external cycle of pressure occurs. You know, you have the World Bank perhaps, and I'm not critical of the World Bank. They are trying to assist through different kinds of international programs. You've got humanitarian agencies, you've got NGOs, you've got food programs, you've got vendors coming in. The thing is homegrown. How do we get the people who are educated, who do have a vision for Somalia, who are working with the grassroots to raise the country? It is a very complex task, but this is the solution. technology will not solve Somalia's problems. It will be part of the solution.
I said it may resolve some key issues that we need in terms of security, which is corruption, fraud, trespassing, etc. These
Yes.
are the key three issues that currently exist now and will exist if there's not an ID system that people can use their finger to identify who they are and record their history.
Yes. And then the question happens, I agree with you. Okay, I don't agree with you yet about using the finger. I don't know if that's the best possible outlet, but then you have to think about the repercussions. Your finger belongs to you. You go to transact somewhere, and perhaps you are acting in a way that is autonomous, but given your decision to use your finger, it may be traced back to you and used against you. You know, it doesn't mean corruption will be overcome by the use of the finger. You know, I could chop your finger off. I could try to dupe the system with another biometric. I could force you to put your finger. How many people now are using their iPhones with biometric, and their spouses or their children go while they're asleep and place their finger on the phone, right? There are ways to overcome biometrics as well. It is a good, secure solution, but it is not. It doesn't mean all our problems will disappear. I can take your finger at gunpoint and say, put it on the system. You start voting and you do this. You know, it is no different to holding a token, like a smart card or a passport. The question is, how will we support this technology with the Constitution, with regulation, with governance structures that say this is how we are to trust the system, this is how we are to use, this is where the data is to reside, this is how we will have control over our information. And I think we can do it with the wonderful experts like yourselves in the room. You know what the country needs. You know what the cultural sensitivities are. So we have to have what we call socio-technical sensibility, to be reflective and reflexive on our practice, to say, okay, this is what we want to do. We think it will solve this problem. Now, how do we do it? How do we do it? How do we institute this? Because biometrics may well be the solution. I've talked to consultants who have lived in Somalia, white consultants from America, who have said, we are not imposing this on the people. We are trying to be culturally sensitive. We are living in the country for 3, 5, 10 years. We are trying to see what is happening. We get questions, we educate, we answer, we go in and out, and then we leave the country, and we want them to have the impetus to make the decisions for themselves.
Katina, it's a very passionate discussion. We probably have time for one more question. So,
Hi, Katina. In the past couple of years or decades, the Western world have tried to implement biometric or ID electronic system, particularly the country that we live in, Australia, that has failed. Why do you think online electronic or biometric solution is the best solution for Somalia?
Personally, I don't. I don't think biometrics are the perfect solution. You know, we haven't gone into the technical issues here. False reject rates or false acceptance rates, issues of masquerading, issues of duping. What happens if you don't have a finger? What happens if you are disabled? Are we using multimodal biometrics, eyes, face, and finger? So I personally don't join the club to say smart cards or biometrics or wearables or some token. Rather, I would like to see what is actually culturally acceptable. If the Somali people feel scared by the fingerprint, I will not use the fingerprint. Maybe we will use some other mobile technology. I don't know what that is, but we need to ask these people, how do you feel by using your fingerprint? Because many people feel that fingerprint is like criminal, right? So the question is, why are we not asking these fundamental questions of a representative group? And I think this is what you're going to achieve today through your focus groups, is to think, I am a Somalian, what would I find acceptable? Now, you are a little bit different because you are now part of the diaspora. You are away from Somalia, but still you have the innate Somalian sensibilities. So what is acceptable to you? You know, acceptable to women. Is it acceptable, as has been noted in the information, that 5-year-olds and above are fingerprinted? To me, that is unacceptable. You're a minor. Why? You're not voting at 5. Why are we taking the fingerprints? You know, and so what is the purpose? Is the purpose to encourage a change in the country's direction? And if so, Is this at the heart of the people, or is this at the system of the people? I don't know. I think it's at the heart. How do we enact change in the people's heart to be one, to be working towards a coordinated vision of prosperity, not conflict, and definitely not external geopolitical pressures that want to get into Somalia for one reason. It's a tactical location. I showed you on the map. You know this. This is the entry into one of the most incredible parts of the world, the Gulf of Aden. And I think you've got a lot of ammunition to think and be inspired today. I'm so grateful for the opportunity to speak to you from Arizona, but also I see some incredible minds in the audience, so congratulations for being there.
Thank you again, Katina. Beautiful segue into the focus groups, which we're about to do.
Okay, have a wonderful day. Thank you again.
Thank you. We will share our findings, of course, with you and get your insights on all these topics. So we really appreciate it, and we'll see you again.
Thank you. Bye now, everyone.
Bye.